The antiseptic smell of the hospice room hit me like a wall every time I walked through those heavy wooden doors. The afternoon sunlight filtered through gauze curtains, casting everything in a soft, ethereal glow that seemed too peaceful for the storm brewing in my chest. My mother lay propped against pristine white pillows, her once vibrant auburn hair now silver wisps against the pale fabric. But it wasn't her frail appearance that made my heart race. It was the way she turned her face away when she saw me, her blue eyes clouded with what looked like disappointment. "Mom?" I whispered, setting down the fresh daffodils I'd brought from my garden. The plastic chair creaked as I settled beside her bed. "How are you feeling today?" She remained silent for a long moment, her breathing shallow and labored. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but the words cut through me like broken glass. "I never thought you'd say those things about me, Margaret. After everything I've done for you." My stomach dropped. This incredible story needs to be heard, so please like and subscribe if you want more. Where in the world are you watching? Because what happened next in that sterile room would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. "What things, Mom? I don't understand." I leaned forward, catching the faint scent of her lavender hand cream mixed with the medicinal smell that seemed to cling to everything in this place. Her eyes filled with tears. "Patricia told me what you said, about how I was a terrible mother, about how you wished I'd just hurry up and—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but the pain in her voice told me everything I needed to know. "My name is Margaret Coleman. I'm 51 years old, and in that moment, I felt my world tilt on its axis. Patricia, my younger sister by 3 years, had always been the dramatic one in our family. Growing up in our childhood home on Maple Street, she was the one who'd blame broken dishes on the wind, who'd swear she'd done her homework when her backpack was clearly empty. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. Mom, I never said any of those things. I would never say those things." My voice cracked as I reached for her hand, feeling how thin and cold her fingers had become. "When did Patricia tell you this?" "Yesterday, and the day before. She said you told your friend how much of a burden I am, how you can't wait for this to be over." Each word seemed to take enormous effort, and I watched her chest rise and fall with the strain of speaking. The floor felt like it was shifting beneath my feet. I thought about my husband, David Coleman, who'd been married to me for 26 years and had watched me cry myself to sleep 3 nights this week over Mom's declining health. David knew better than anyone how desperately I was clinging to every remaining moment with her. Just this morning, over coffee in our sunny kitchen with its yellow gingham curtains, he'd watched me carefully pack Mom's favorite homemade chocolate chip cookies, the recipe she'd taught me when I was barely tall enough to reach the counter. "I need to call David," I said, more to myself than to her. But Mom had already closed her eyes, turning her face toward the wall in a gesture that felt like a physical rejection. I stepped into the hallway, my hands shaking as I dialed. The institutional green walls seemed to press in around me as I waited for him to answer. "Maggie? How's your mom today?" David's warm voice immediately centered me. I could hear the concern, the same tone he'd been using for weeks now as we'd navigated this impossible time together. "David, something's wrong, really wrong. Mom thinks I said terrible things about her. She says Patricia told her I called her a burden, that I said I wanted this to be over." The words tumbled out in a rush, my voice echoing off the polished linoleum floors. The silence on the other end stretched too long. "But Maggie, you've barely spoken to anyone about this except me and Jennifer. And we both know you'd never. Jennifer Hartwell, my closest friend since college, was the only other person who'd seen me break down about Mom's diagnosis. We'd known each other for nearly 30 years, ever since we were assigned as roommates in our freshman dorm. She'd held me while I sobbed in her cozy living room just last week, surrounded by her collection of ceramic owls and the smell of her perpetual pot of coffee brewing. Jennifer knew every detail of my relationship with Mom, including how guilty I felt about not visiting enough before the cancer diagnosis. "I need to figure out what's happening," I told David. "This doesn't make sense. Patricia knows how much Mom means to me." But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Patricia had always been jealous of my relationship with our parents. She'd moved to California right after college, visiting maybe twice a year, while I'd stayed local, having Sunday dinners with Mom and Dad, until Dad passed 5 years ago. Since Mom's diagnosis, Patricia had suddenly reappeared, taking a leave of absence from her job as a marketing executive to be the devoted daughter. When I returned to Mom's room, she was staring at the ceiling, her breathing more labored than before. The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across the worn carpeting. "Mom, please, let me explain. I think there's been a misunderstanding." She turned to look at me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman who'd bandaged my scraped knees and stayed up all night when I had pneumonia in 3rd grade. "Patricia said you wouldn't deny it. She said you'd try to make me think she was lying." The calculated nature of it hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just miscommunication. This was deliberate. Methodical. Patricia had anticipated my response and poisoned Mom against it in advance. I sat there for another hour, watching Mom drift in and out of sleep, her face peaceful, but somehow closed off from me. The nurses moved quietly through their routines, checking monitors and adjusting medication. But I felt completely alone in that room full of gentle activity. By the time I left that evening, the spring air outside felt shockingly fresh after hours of recycled hospital air. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel and trying to process what was happening. Patricia's silver sedan wasn't in the parking lot. She usually came for evening visits, armed with fresh flowers and that bright, performative smile she'd perfected. One small detail blew the whole thing open. I decided to drive past Patricia's apartment complex on my way home. I'd only been there once, when she first moved back to town, but I remembered the upscale development with its manicured lawns and identical mailboxes. Her car was there, parked in her designated spot under the carport. The lights were on in her second-floor unit. Standing there in the parking lot, staring up at those glowing windows, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion began crystallizing into something sharper. I found myself analyzing every interaction I'd had with Patricia since Mom's diagnosis, looking for clues I'd missed. There was the day she'd insisted on handling all of Mom's medical appointments, claiming I was too emotional to ask the right questions. The way she'd started bringing Mom meals every day, making sure to mention how she was finally stepping up since I'd been so busy with work. The subtle comments about how I should have visited more over the years, delivered with a concerned smile that made them sound like loving worry rather than accusations. I drove home to my small ranch house, the same one I'd lived in for 8 years, where the familiar surroundings usually brought comfort. Tonight, everything felt different. I walked through rooms that suddenly seemed too quiet, too empty. I kept replaying Mom's words. She said you told her I was being dramatic about the pain. The cruelty of it was staggering. Mom had been so worried about being a burden, constantly apologizing for needing help, for the medical bills, for taking up space in our lives. Patricia knew this. She knew exactly where Mom was most vulnerable. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table. the same oak one Mom had given me when I bought the house. She'd helped me sand it down and restain it, both of us covered in wood dust, laughing about how we had no idea what we were doing. That was the Mom I knew, the one who would tackle any project with stubborn determination and find joy in the messiest parts. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "How did it go today?" "Still thinking about you." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Can you come over? I need to talk this through." 20 minutes later, Jennifer was sitting across from me at that same oak table, her curly hair pulled back in the messy bun she always wore after work. She'd changed out of her teacher clothes into jeans and a sweater, and she'd brought a box of cookies from the bakery near her house. "Tell me everything," she said, settling into the chair Mom had always preferred when she visited. So I did. I told her about Mom's words, about the specific lies Patricia had apparently told, about the calculated way Patricia had predicted my denials. Jennifer listened without interrupting, occasionally reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "The thing that keeps bothering me," I said, "is how well Patricia knows Mom's insecurities. It's like she made a list of everything Mom worries about and found a way to confirm those fears." Jennifer nodded slowly. "What does your gut tell you about Patricia's motives?" I'd been avoiding that question, but sitting there in the safety of my own kitchen with my oldest friend, I finally let myself consider it. "I think she's rewriting history, making herself the good daughter and me the bad one. Maybe she feels guilty about all those years of barely staying in touch, and this is easier than dealing with that guilt. Or maybe," Jennifer said gently, "she's trying to make sure she's the one Mom thinks about at the end, the one who gets the credit for being there." The possibility made my stomach turn, but it felt true. Patricia had always needed to be special, to be the center of attention. Even as kids, she'd found ways to make my accomplishments about her somehow. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I asked. "Mom's dying, Jennifer. I don't want to spend whatever time we have left fighting about this." "But you can't let Patricia poison your relationship with your mother either." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation settling between us. Finally, Jennifer spoke again. "Have you considered talking to Patricia directly?" "About what? Accusing her of lying to our dying mother? She'll just deny it." "Maybe. Or maybe if you approach it right, you can figure out what's really going on." The next morning, I called Patricia. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number, but I'd spent most of the night thinking about what Jennifer had said. I couldn't let this continue without at least trying to understand. "Oh, hi," Patricia said when she answered. Her voice had that bright, slightly artificial tone she used when she was being performatively cheerful. "I was just getting ready to head to the hospital." "Mom had a rough night." "That's actually why I'm calling. I was there yesterday, and Mom seemed upset about some things she thought I'd said. I was hoping we could talk about it." There was a pause. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had changed, become more guarded. "Mom's medications make her confused sometimes. The doctors warned us about that." This wasn't confusion, Patricia. These were very specific statements she believed I'd made. About her being dramatic, about the medical bills, about her being a burden. Another pause, longer this time. "Look," Patricia finally said. "Maybe you don't realize how some of the things you say come across. Mom's very sensitive right now." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost questioned myself. Almost. What exactly did I say that came across wrong? "I don't want to get into this over the phone. It's not helpful for anyone, especially Mom." "Then let's meet. Today. before either of us goes to see her." I could hear Patricia breathing on the other end of the line. When she finally agreed to meet at the coffee shop near the hospital, her voice was tight with something I couldn't quite identify. Annoyance? Fear? As I got ready to leave the house, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. Whatever was about to happen, at least I was finally going to get some answers. But what Patricia told me when we sat down across from each other in that crowded coffee shop would reveal a truth I never could have anticipated. The coffee shop was busier than I'd expected for a Tuesday morning, which somehow made the conversation feel both more private and more exposed. Patricia sat across from me, stirring sugar into her latte with mechanical precision, her eyes focused anywhere but on my face. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "what did you want to tell me?" Patricia set down her spoon and finally looked at me directly. What I saw in her expression caught me completely off guard. It wasn't defiance or anger or even guilt. It was exhaustion, the kind that goes bone deep. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said quietly. My heart started hammering against my ribs. "What do you mean?" Patricia took a shaky breath. "Mom was so scared. You remember that first day after the diagnosis? She kept saying she was going to be a burden, that we'd all be better off without her." She was spiraling, and nothing I said was helping. I did remember. The panic in our mother's eyes, the way she'd grabbed my hand and asked if I was angry about having to deal with her illness. But I still didn't understand what Patricia was getting at. "So, what does that have to do with—" "I told her you said she was being dramatic," Patricia interrupted. "Just once. Just that one time when she was crying about the medical bills and saying she should just stop treatment. I thought if she believed you were frustrated with her attitude, she might snap out of it and fight harder." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat there staring at her, trying to process what she'd just admitted. "You lied to our dying mother to manipulate her into fighting cancer?" "It worked," Patricia said, her voice getting defensive. "She got angry instead of depressed. She started asking more questions about her treatment, stopped talking about giving up." "But you didn't stop there, did you?" The pieces were falling into place now, and I felt sick. "You kept doing it." Patricia's face crumpled slightly. "She kept getting scared. Every setback, every bad day, she'd start talking about being a burden again. And every time I mentioned something you'd supposedly said, she'd get that spark back, that determination." I couldn't speak. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't find words big enough to contain it. "I know how it sounds," Patricia continued, tears starting to form in her eyes. "But she's been fighting for 3 months longer than the doctors expected. 3 months because she's been angry enough to keep going." "She's been suffering," I managed to say. "You made our mother suffer, thinking her own daughter hated her, so she'd live longer to endure more pain." "That's not—" Patricia started, then stopped. Her hands were shaking now. "I didn't think about it that way." The worst part was that I could see the twisted logic in it. Patricia had always been a fixer, someone who couldn't sit still when things were falling apart. But this was so far beyond fixing that I couldn't comprehend how she justified it to herself. "How many times?" I asked. "How many lies have you told her?" Patricia looked down at her untouched latte. "I don't know. It became automatic. Whenever she started giving up, I'd mention something you'd supposedly said about her attitude or her complaints. Small things, usually. Small things," I repeated. "Patricia, she asked me yesterday why I hated her so much." The tears started falling then, but I felt no sympathy. I was too angry, too hurt, too overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she'd done. "I can fix this," Patricia said desperately. "I can tell her I misunderstood what you said, that I was confused or—" "More lies? What else am I supposed to do? Tell her I've been manipulating her for months while she's been dying?" It was a fair question, and one I had no answer for. How do you undo that kind of systematic deception without destroying what little piece a dying person might have left? "I need to think about this," I said, standing up so abruptly that I knocked my chair back. "Please don't tell Mom," Patricia called after me as I walked away. "Please." "It will destroy her." I drove around for 2 hours before I could trust myself to call Jennifer. When I finally did, I was sitting in my car in an empty parking lot, staring at nothing. "She admitted it," I said as soon as Jennifer picked up. "All of it. She's been lying to Mom for months, trying to manipulate her into fighting harder." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "Jesus, how are you holding up?" "I don't know. I keep going back and forth between wanting to strangle Patricia and wondering if she might be right. What if the lies really did help Mom fight longer?" "That doesn't make them okay." "Doesn't it?" I asked, and hearing the question out loud made me realize how lost I felt. If Mom lives an extra few months because she's angry at me instead of giving up, does the reason matter? Of course it matters. She's spending her final months believing her daughter thinks she's a burden. That's not living, that's suffering. But even as Jennifer said it, I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. This wasn't a situation with clear moral lines, and we both knew it. "I have to see her today," I said. "I can't avoid her, and I can't pretend everything's normal. But I also can't tell her the truth about Patricia without destroying whatever trust she has left in anyone." "So what are you going to do?" That was the question that had been eating at me since I'd left the coffee shop. Because there was something Patricia didn't know, something that might change everything. Something Mom had whispered to me yesterday that I hadn't fully processed until now. And it meant that everything Patricia thought she knew about Mom's condition might be wrong. The cancer center's parking garage felt like a concrete tomb as I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to find words for something that didn't make sense even in my own head. "What did your mom whisper to you?" Jennifer asked gently. I closed my eyes, remembering the moment. Mom had been drifting in and out of sleep when I'd visited the day before. Patricia had stepped out to talk to the nurse, and Mom had suddenly gripped my hand with surprising strength. "She said something about the test results," I said slowly. "About how the doctors were wrong before, and they might be wrong again. She kept saying, the numbers, over and over." "What numbers?" "I don't know, but she seemed almost excited, like she knew something we didn't." I rubbed my forehead, where a headache was building. Patricia has been so focused on keeping Mom fighting that she might have missed something important. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "You think your mom's condition might not be what Patricia believes it is?" "I think Patricia has been so busy orchestrating Mom's emotional state that she hasn't been listening to what Mom's actually trying to tell us." The realization hit me like a physical blow. What if Mom isn't as close to dying as we thought? What if Patricia's been putting us all through this nightmare for nothing? The elevator ride up to Mom's floor felt endless. Each ding of the floor's passing seemed to echo the questions hammering in my skull. When the doors finally opened, I found myself walking down the familiar hallway with leaden feet, past the rooms filled with other families facing their own impossible choices. Mom's room was at the end of the hall, and through the small window in the door, I could see her sitting up in bed, more alert than she'd been in weeks. Patricia was slouched in the visitor's chair, looking like she hadn't slept. I pushed open the door, and both women looked up at me. Mom's face immediately clouded over, and I felt the familiar stab of pain seeing her recoil from my presence. "I didn't think you'd come today," Mom said quietly. Patricia's eyes met mine over Mom's head, pleading and desperate. The weight of our conversation from the morning sat between us like a living thing. "Of course I came," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "How are you feeling?" "Better, actually." Mom's voice had more strength in it than I'd heard in months. "The doctors came by this morning with some test results." Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Mom, you should rest instead of talking about medical stuff." "I'm not an invalid, Patricia," Mom snapped, and I was startled by the sharpness in her tone. "I'm perfectly capable of discussing my own health." She turned back to me, and for a moment, her expression softened despite whatever poison Patricia had been feeding her about me. "The scans from last week showed something unexpected." "What kind of something?" I asked, moving closer to her bed despite Patricia's obvious discomfort. "The tumors have stopped growing. Dr. Martinez says in some cases, they've actually shrunk." Mom's eyes were brighter than they'd been in months. "It's not a cure, but it means I have more time than we thought. Maybe a lot more time." The room went dead silent. I stared at Mom, then at Patricia, whose face had gone completely white. "How much more time?" I managed to ask. "Months, possibly years if this continues. They want to start me on a new treatment protocol." Mom reached for my hand, and I was too shocked to pull away. "I know we've had our difficulties lately, but I want to fight this. I want to be here for both my daughters." Patricia made a small, strangled sound. I looked at her and saw the full horror of the situation dawning on her face. All those months of manipulation, all those lies designed to keep Mom fighting for a few extra weeks, and Mom was going to live long enough to eventually learn the truth about everything. The irony was devastating. Patricia had gotten exactly what she wanted. Mom was fighting and winning. But now the very lies that had supposedly motivated that fight would become impossible to sustain. "That's wonderful news, Mom," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "It is," she agreed, squeezing my hand. "And I hope we can work through whatever's been wrong between us. Patricia's told me about some of the things you've said, but maybe we can talk about it directly. I don't want to waste whatever time I have left being angry at my own daughter." Patricia stood up abruptly, knocking over her coffee cup. The brown liquid spread across the small bedside table, dripping onto the floor. "I should get some paper towels," she mumbled, practically fleeing from the room. Mom watched her go with a frown. "She's been so strange lately, hovering, watching everything I say. It's like she's afraid I'm going to break if she leaves me alone for 5 minutes." I stared at the door Patricia had just escaped through, my mind racing. Mom was going to live. That should have been the best possible news, but instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Because eventually, inevitably, the truth would come out, and when it did, it wouldn't just destroy Mom's relationship with Patricia. It would destroy our entire family. "Mom," I said slowly, "we need to talk." The words hung in the air between us like a blade waiting to fall. Mom's eyes searched my face, and I could see the exact moment when her maternal instincts kicked in, recognizing something was seriously wrong. "What is it, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." I had seen a ghost. The ghost of the relationship Patricia and I used to have. The ghost of the family we'd been before fear and desperation had twisted everything into lies. My hands were shaking, and I pressed them flat against my thighs to steady them. Mom, before we talk about anything else, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded slowly, her grip tightening on my hand. What exactly has Patricia told you that I said about you? Mom's face shifted, becoming cautious. Sweetheart, I don't think rehashing hurtful things is going to help anyone. Please, Mom, I need to know. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. She said you told her you thought I was being dramatic about the cancer. That you said I was milking it for attention. The words came out reluctantly. And that you were tired of having to pretend to care when you just wanted to get on with your life. Each word hit me like a physical blow. I had to close my eyes and take several deep breaths before I could trust myself to speak. Mom, I never said any of those things, not one word of it. What do you mean? I mean, Patricia has been lying to you, completely, deliberately lying. My voice was getting stronger now, fueled by months of suppressed anger and hurt. I never said anything like that. Ever. In fact, I've spent the last 6 months feeling like I was losing my mind because you've been so cold to me, and I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. Mom's face went through a series of expressions. Confusion, doubt, and then something that looked like the beginning of terrible understanding. But why would she do that? I think she was trying to make you angry. To give you something to fight for when you were talking about giving up on treatment. The explanation felt inadequate even as I said it. She thought if you were mad enough at me, you'd keep fighting to stay alive long enough to work things out. That's insane. I know it sounds insane, but Mom, think about it. When did I supposedly say these things? Did you ever hear them directly from me? Mom was quiet, and I could see her mentally reviewing the past months. Patricia would come to me after she'd talked to you on the phone, or after you'd left from visiting. She'd be upset, saying she didn't want to tell me but thought I should know. And did you notice that I never brought up whatever fight we were supposedly having? That I kept acting like everything was normal between us? I thought you were just avoiding the subject, or that you didn't realize how much you'd hurt me. Mom's voice was getting smaller. Patricia said you probably didn't even remember saying those things because you were so stressed about work. The elaborate web of lies was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. Patricia had thought of everything, even explanations for why the story didn't quite make sense. Mom, I swear to you on Dad's grave, I never said any of those things. The only thing I'm guilty of is not pushing harder to find out why you suddenly seemed to hate me. Tears were starting to form in Mom's eyes. Oh, honey, what have we done? The bathroom door opened, and Patricia appeared with a handful of paper towels. She stopped dead when she saw both of us crying, and the color drained completely from her face. What's going on? She asked, but her voice already knew the answer. We need to talk, Patricia, Mom said quietly. All three of us. Patricia looked at the door like she was calculating whether she could make it out before we stopped her. I should really get going. I have that thing with Jake tonight, remember? Sit down, Patricia. Mom's voice carried an authority I hadn't heard from her in months. Now. Patricia sat down heavily in her chair, the paper towels falling forgotten to the floor. She looked like she was about to be sick. Your sister says she never said the things you told me she said. She says you've been lying to me about her for months. That's crazy, Patricia said, but her voice was barely a whisper. Why would I do that? You tell me, Mom said. The silence stretched between us. I watched Patricia's face cycle through different expressions, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Finally, her shoulders sagged in defeat. "You were giving up," she said, so quietly we had to strain to hear her. "You kept talking about stopping treatment, about how tired you were, about how maybe it was time to accept things, and I couldn't lose you. I couldn't let you give up. So you decided to turn me against my other daughter? I thought if you had something to be angry about, something to fight for, you'd keep going with the treatments. I thought I could fix it later, after you got better. I never thought you'd actually get better enough for this long." The last sentence came out as barely more than a breath. Mom stared at Patricia like she was looking at a stranger. "You manipulated both of your own family members because you thought you knew better than we did about how to handle this situation? I was trying to save your life." "By destroying mine," I said. "Do you have any idea what the last 6 months have been like for me? Thinking my dying mother hated me and not knowing why?" Patricia finally looked at me, and her face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was going to tell you both the truth once Mom was in remission. I had a plan." "Your plan failed, Patricia," Mom said, her voice carrying a cold edge I'd never heard before. "And now, I don't know if I can trust either of you anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke. I watched Mom's face process what she'd just said, and I could see the moment she realized the implications of her own statement. She'd lumped Patricia and me together as people she couldn't trust, but I was the victim here, not the perpetrator. "Mom," I said carefully, "I understand you're upset, but I didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one who's been hurt by this." She closed her eyes and pressed her fingers to her temples. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just so confused right now. I don't know what's real anymore." Patricia was crying silently, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her hands. Part of me wanted to comfort her. She was still my little sister. Still the person I'd protected from bullies and helped with homework and taught to drive. But a larger part of me felt like I was looking at someone I'd never really known. "I kept a list," Patricia whispered. "What?" Mom and I said at the same time. "I kept a list of all the things I told you," she said, "so I could remember what lies I'd told. I was going to confess everything once you were better, and then show her the list, so she'd know exactly what I'd accused her of saying. I thought maybe if she knew the specific things, she could help me figure out how to apologize properly." The casual calculation of it hit me like a physical blow. She'd been methodical about destroying my relationship with our mother. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment desperation. This was planned, documented manipulation. "Where is this list?" Mom asked, her voice deadly quiet. Patricia's face went even paler. "In my car." "In my planner." "Go get it." "Mom, I don't think that's necessary." "Go get it." Patricia practically ran from the room. I heard the front door slam, then her car door, then footsteps running back up the walkway. She returned clutching a small leather planner, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She flipped to a page near the back and held it out to Mom with trembling fingers. Mom took it and scanned the page, her expression growing more horrified with each line she read. "May I see it?" I asked. Mom handed it to me, and I felt my stomach drop as I read Patricia's neat handwriting. 3 pages of bullet points, dated entries spanning 6 months. Things like, "Told Mom that Sarah said her wig looks ridiculous and she should just accept being bald, and said Sarah thinks Mom is being dramatic about the pain levels, and Sarah supposedly said Mom's obsession with fighting the cancer is selfish, because it's putting the family through hell. Reading my own alleged cruelty in my sister's careful script was surreal and nauseating. These weren't just lies, they were character assassinations. They painted me as someone callous and hateful, someone who would kick our mother while she was down. Jesus, Patricia, I breathed. You made me sound like a monster. I was going to fix it, she repeated desperately. I had a whole plan for how to confess and make it right. After the damage was done, Mom said. After you'd poisoned me against her for months. I set the planner aside because my hands were starting to shake too. Do you have any idea what this has done to me? I've been carrying around this guilt, thinking I was a terrible daughter, thinking I'd failed you somehow. I've been afraid to be myself around you because I thought everything I said was wrong. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Patricia. Sorry doesn't give me back the last 6 months of my life, or the relationship I should have had with Mom during the hardest time in our family's history. Mom was staring at the planner like it was evidence of a crime, which in a way, it was. How did you even come up with these things? Some of these are so specific, so cruel. Did you plan them out in advance? Patricia's face crumpled further. I just thought about what would hurt you the most, what would make you angriest. I thought if you were angry enough, you'd fight harder to survive, to prove her wrong. The logic was so twisted, so fundamentally broken, that I didn't even know how to respond. She'd systematically identified our mother's deepest insecurities during the most vulnerable time of her life, and then told her that her own daughter was using those insecurities as weapons against her. Patricia, I said slowly, that's not how love works. That's not how family works. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I was 22 when this started. I didn't know what I was doing. I was terrified. I was terrified too, I shot back. We were all terrified, but I didn't decide to hurt people because of it. Mom stood up abruptly, swaying slightly. I reached out to steady her, but she waved me off. I need some air. I need to think. She walked toward the sliding door that led to her small backyard, then paused with her hand on the handle. Patricia, I want you to leave. Mom, I want you to go home. I need time to process this, and I can't do that with you here right now. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. When should I come back? I don't know. The finality in Mom's voice made Patricia start crying harder. She gathered her purse and jacket with shaking hands, moving like someone in a dream. At the door, she turned back to us. I love you both. I know that doesn't matter right now, but I do. After she left, Mom and I sat in silence. The house felt different somehow, like the air itself had changed. I wanted to comfort Mom, but I also needed comfort myself. I wanted to hate Patricia, but she was still my sister. I wanted to feel victorious that the truth was finally out, but mostly, I just felt empty and exhausted. I don't know what to do now, Mom said quietly. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt my heart sink even further. It was from Jake. Patricia just showed up at my apartment crying hysterically. She's saying something about confessing lies to you and your mom? She won't tell me details, but she's talking about hurting herself. I don't know what's going on, but I think you should know. I stared at the text message, my hands starting to shake. Jake's words blurred together as I read them again. Patricia was at his apartment. She was talking about hurting herself. What is it? Mom asked, noticing my expression. It's from Jake. Patricia went to his place, and she's... I struggled to find the right words. She's not doing well. She's talking about hurting herself. Mom's face went pale. Despite everything Patricia had done, despite the lies and manipulation, she was still her daughter. We have to go to her. Mom, you just told her to leave. You said you needed time to think. I don't care what I said 10 minutes ago. If she's talking about hurting herself, we need to be there. Mom was already moving toward her purse, checking for her car keys. I can't have that on my conscience, not with everything else. I felt torn in a dozen different directions. Part of me was angry that Patricia was now making this crisis about her, that even her confession had become another way to manipulate the situation. But another part of me was genuinely scared. What if she actually meant it? What if this wasn't just another manipulation? I'll drive, I said, taking Mom's keys from her hands. You're in no condition to be behind the wheel right now. The drive to Jake's apartment took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Mom sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her fingers whirring the edge of her sleeve. I could see her mind working, probably replaying every interaction she'd had with Patricia over the past few months, trying to separate the lies from whatever genuine emotions might have been underneath them. I keep thinking about when she was little, Mom said suddenly. She used to get so upset when she thought she was in trouble. She'd hide in her closet for hours, convinced that we didn't love her anymore. That was different, Mom. She was a child then. Was it, though? Maybe this is just a bigger version of hiding in the closet. When we reached Jake's building, I had to help Mom up the stairs. The stress and emotional exhaustion were taking their toll on her already weakened body. By the time we reached Jake's door, she was breathing heavily and had to lean against the wall for support. Jake answered before I could even knock, like he'd been watching for us from the window. His face was creased with worry, and I could see the strain of the past hour written in the tight lines around his eyes. She's in the bathroom, he said quietly, stepping aside to let us in. She's been in there for about 30 minutes. She keeps saying she's sorry, that she's ruined everything, that everyone would be better off without her. Has she said anything specific about hurting herself? I asked. Not directly. But she asked me if I had any sleeping pills, said she was exhausted, and just wanted everything to stop. I told her I didn't have any, but it scared me. Mom walked toward the bathroom door and knocked gently. Patricia? Honey, it's Mom. I'm here with your sister. We want to talk to you. There was silence for a long moment. Then the sound of Patricia moving around. I thought you wanted me to leave. I thought you never wanted to see me again. I was hurt and angry, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. Can you open the door, please? More silence. Jake caught my eye and mouthed, The door's not locked. I nodded, filing that information away in case we needed it. I can't face you both right now, Patricia said through the door. I keep seeing Mom's face when she realized what I'd done. I keep thinking about all the time you lost together because of my lies. Then let's talk about that, Mom said, settling herself on the floor with her back against the door. I wanted to tell her not to sit on Jake's hallway floor, that it wasn't good for her, but I recognized the determined set of her shoulders. Tell me why you thought lying was better than the truth. Because the truth was that I was falling apart, Patricia said, her voice muffled. The truth was that I couldn't handle watching you die. Couldn't handle the thought that I might not be strong enough to take care of you the way you took care of Dad. Jake sat down in his living room chair, staying close enough to hear but giving us space to handle this as a family. I found myself grateful for his presence, for the steadiness he brought to the chaos. So, you decided to make me think my other daughter hated me? Mom asked. There was hurt in her voice, but also something softer now, something that sounded almost like understanding. I thought if you were angry enough at her, you'd fight harder to stay alive. I thought if you had something to prove, someone to show wrong, you wouldn't give up. The twisted logic was becoming clearer now, and somehow that made it worse. Patricia hadn't been randomly cruel. She'd been calculating in her manipulation, which meant she'd understood exactly how much damage she was causing. "Patricia," I said, settling down next to Mom on the floor. "Open the door, please. We can't fix this with you hiding in Jake's bathroom." "What if it can't be fixed?" she asked, and for the first time, her voice sounded very young and very scared. "What if I've broken everything so badly that there's no way back?" I looked at Mom, seeing my own uncertainty reflected in her face. The truth was, I didn't know if this could be fixed. The lies had been too deliberate, too sustained, too cruel. But I also knew that Patricia was my sister, and despite everything, I couldn't let her disappear into whatever dark place she was heading toward. "We don't know," I said honestly. "But we can't find out if you hurt yourself. And we can't even try if you won't come out and talk to us." The bathroom door opened slowly, and Patricia appeared in the doorway. She looked terrible. Her face was blotchy and swollen, her hair was disheveled, and there was something in her eyes that looked dangerously close to despair. But as she looked down at Mom and me sitting on the floor, as she saw that we'd come after her despite everything, something shifted in her expression. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "Neither do we," Mom said, struggling to get to her feet. I helped her up, and we all moved into Jake's living room. But running away or hurting yourself isn't going to help anyone. We sat in Jake's living room, Patricia curled up in the corner of his couch, Mom in the chair, me on the floor, and Jake maintaining his quiet, supportive presence. The afternoon light was fading, and I realized we'd been dealing with this crisis for hours now. "I think," Mom said slowly, "we need to start over. All of us. I need to understand why you felt like you couldn't come to me with your fears. You need to understand the damage you caused. And we all need to figure out how to move forward." Patricia nodded, wiping her nose with a tissue Jake had handed her. "I want to try. I really do want to fix this." "It's going to take time," I said. "And it's going to be hard. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal." "I know." But even as we sat there talking about trying to rebuild our family relationships, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something important. Patricia's confession had answered the question of what she'd done, but I still didn't fully understand why she'd been so systematic about it, so thorough in her manipulation. And then Jake's phone buzzed with a notification, and as he glanced at it, his face changed in a way that made my stomach drop. "What is it?" I asked. He looked at Patricia, then at Mom, then back at me. "It's an email from Patricia, sent about an hour ago before you got here." Patricia's face went white. "Jake, don't... What kind of email?" Mom asked, her voice sharp with new worry. Jake's expression was grim as he looked at the screen. It's addressed to all of Patricia's contacts, everyone in her phone, and the subject line says, 'The truth about what I've done to my family.'" The silence in Jake's living room was deafening. Patricia had gone completely pale, staring at Jake's phone like it was a weapon pointed at her. "What does it say?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Jake glanced at Patricia, who had buried her face in her hands. "Should I read it?" "Yes," Mom said firmly. "If it's already been sent to everyone, we need to know what we're dealing with." "Patricia?" Jake asked gently. Is it okay if I read this? She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. It doesn't matter anymore, does it? I already sent it. I can't take it back. Jake cleared his throat and began reading from his phone. The subject line is, "The truth about what I've done to my family," and it says, "To everyone in my contacts, I need to confess something terrible that I've done. For months, I've been lying to my dying mother about my sister Sarah. I told my mother that Sarah said awful things about her that Sarah never said. I made it all up because I was jealous and scared. I've destroyed my family with my lies, and now my mother doesn't trust Sarah, and Sarah doesn't trust me, and everything is falling apart. I don't know how to fix what I've broken. I don't deserve forgiveness, but Sarah deserves the truth. She's a good person who loves our mother, and I ruined that. This is my fault, all of it. I'm sorry." Jake lowered the phone. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on his wall. "Patricia," Mom said slowly, "how many people did this go to?" Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. "Everyone, my whole contact list. Friends from college, people I work with, neighbors, family friends, everyone." I felt a strange mix of vindication and horror. On one hand, Patricia had finally told the truth publicly. On the other hand, she'd just broadcast our family's most painful, private crisis to dozens of people. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you do that?" Patricia looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Because when I was in that bathroom, I kept thinking about how you must feel. Having people think you said terrible things about Mom when you didn't. Having Mom doubt you when all you've ever done is love her. And I realized that apologizing to you two wasn't enough. The lies I told weren't just private lies between us. They affected how other people see you too." "What other people?" Mom asked, her voice sharp with concern. "When you and I would fight about Sarah," Patricia said, looking at Mom, "I would call Jake or I'd vent to my friends about it. I'd tell them how hurt you were by what Sarah supposedly said. I made other people think Sarah was this terrible daughter who was being cruel to her dying mother. The weight of this hit me like a truck. It wasn't just that Patricia had poisoned my relationship with Mom. She'd been poisoning my reputation with people I barely knew." "So now what?" I asked. "Now all these people know our business, and they're going to want to respond, or ask questions, or—" "I turned my phone off," Patricia said quickly. "Right after I sent it, I couldn't handle seeing the responses." Jake was shaking his head. "Patricia, this is a lot." Sending that email might have felt like the right thing to do in the moment, but now you've created a whole new problem. "I know," Patricia said miserably. "I keep making everything worse. Every time I try to fix something, I just break something else." Mom was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "I think I understand why you did it. You wanted to clear Sarah's name with everyone who might have heard the lies." "Yes," Patricia said eagerly. "Exactly. I couldn't stand the thought of people thinking badly of Sarah because of what I said." "But you didn't ask us first," I pointed out. "You just decided to air all our family problems to everyone you know." "I wasn't thinking clearly," Patricia admitted. "I was in panic mode. I felt like I was drowning, and I just wanted to fix everything all at once." Jake set his phone aside and leaned forward. "The thing is, you can't control how people are going to react to that email. Some of them might be supportive, but others might judge your whole family for having these problems." "I know," Patricia whispered. "I'm sorry. I keep saying I'm sorry, but I keep doing things that hurt you." Mom struggled to stand up from Jake's chair. "Patricia, come here." What? Come here, Mom repeated, opening her arms. Patricia looked confused, but stood up and walked over to Mom. Mom pulled her into a hug, and Patricia immediately started crying again. You're not a terrible person, Mom said quietly. You're a person who made terrible choices, but that's not the same thing. And the fact that you're this upset about it tells me that this isn't who you really are. But I hurt you. Patricia sobbed into Mom's shoulder. I hurt both of you so badly. Yes, you did, Mom said, not sugarcoating it. But hurt can heal. What matters now is what we do moving forward. I watched this scene feeling conflicted. Part of me was glad to see Patricia finally breaking down, finally showing real remorse. But another part of me was frustrated that Mom was already offering comfort when I was still processing the damage that had been done. Jake must have sensed my struggle because he said, Sarah, how are you feeling about all this? I took a deep breath. Honestly, I'm overwhelmed. An hour ago, I didn't even know why Mom was angry with me. Now I find out my sister has been systematically lying about me for months, and she's just told our entire extended social circle about our family problems. I don't even know where to start processing this. Mom released Patricia from the hug, but kept her hands on her shoulders. Sarah's right. We can't just hug this away. Patricia, you need to understand that Sarah gets to be angry about this for as long as she needs to be angry. You don't get to decide when she's ready to forgive you. Patricia nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. I hate that I did this. I hate who I became. So don't be that person anymore, I said. But also, don't expect us to pretend this didn't happen just because you feel bad about it. I won't, Patricia said. I promise I won't. Jake's phone started buzzing with notifications. He glanced at it and winced. Patricia, I think people are starting to respond to your email. Patricia looked terrified. What are they saying? I'm not going to read them right now, Jake said diplomatically. But you're going to have to deal with this eventually. You can't keep your phone off forever. Mom sat back down in the chair, looking exhausted. Patricia, I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more big dramatic gestures. No more trying to fix everything at once. No more making decisions about our family without talking to us first. I promise. And, Mom continued, you need to get some help. This level of manipulation, the lies, the jealousy, the impulsive decisions, you need to talk to someone professional about why this happened and how to make sure it doesn't happen again. Patricia nodded. You're right. I know you're right. I looked at my sister, this person I'd grown up with, this person I thought I knew, and realized I was looking at a stranger. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the sister I thought I knew had been a fiction anyway, and now we had a chance to build something real. There's one more thing, I said slowly. I need to know if there are any other lies. Any other things you've said about me to Mom or to other people? Because I can't keep being blindsided like this. Patricia was quiet for so long that I started to worry. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. There might be one more thing. The room went completely silent. Even the sound of the heater seemed to fade away as we all stared at Patricia. What do you mean, one more thing? Mom asked, her voice tight with exhaustion and barely contained frustration. Patricia's hands were shaking now. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. It's not about Sarah directly, but it affects her. Patricia, Jake said firmly, just say it. We're all here. We're dealing with everything today, apparently. I may have told some people at Mom's doctor's office that Sarah wasn't really involved in her care, Patricia whispered, when they were asking about family contacts and who had medical power of attorney information. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. You what? Mom's face went pale. Patricia, what exactly did you tell them? I told them that Sarah lived too far away to be reliable in an emergency and that I was the primary caregiver, so they should contact me first for everything. The words tumbled out in a rush. And I may have implied that you didn't really want Sarah making medical decisions because you weren't close. Oh my God, I breathed. Patricia, do you realize what you've done? If something happens to Mom and they can't reach you, they won't call me because they think I'm not involved in her care. Mom was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. Patricia, I specifically told Dr. Martinez that both my daughters should be contacted for any emergencies. I told him Sarah has my power of attorney documents and knows all my wishes. I know, Patricia said, tears streaming down her face again. I was just so afraid that if something happened and I wasn't there, everyone would think I was a bad daughter for not being the one handling everything. Jake ran his hands through his hair. This is insane, Patricia. You could have created a genuine medical emergency situation. When did this happen? I demanded. How long have they been thinking I'm not supposed to be contacted? About 3 months ago, Patricia admitted. Maybe 4. I started pacing again, my mind racing. 3 months? Patricia, what if Mom had fallen and they couldn't reach you? What if she'd had an emergency and they wasted precious time trying to contact only you because they thought I wasn't supposed to be involved? I always have my phone, Patricia said weakly. That's not the point, I exploded. You don't always have your phone. Nobody always has their phone. What if you were in a dead zone, or your battery died, or you were in a meeting, or you got in an accident yourself? What then, Patricia? Mom was staring at Patricia with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger exactly, but it was something harder and scarier than anger. Patricia, Mom said very quietly, you put my safety at risk because of your jealousy. I didn't think about it that way, Patricia said, sobbing now. That's the problem, Mom continued. You didn't think about me at all. You thought about yourself and how you wanted to look to other people. Jake sat down heavily on the couch. Patricia, this isn't just about family drama anymore. This is about your mom's actual physical safety. I stopped pacing and looked directly at Patricia. I need you to fix this, tomorrow. I need you to call Dr. Martinez's office and tell them exactly what you told them before was wrong, and that both daughters should be contacted for emergencies. I will, Patricia said immediately. First thing tomorrow? No, Mom said firmly. Today. You're calling today. Right now. Patricia looked panicked. But it's Sunday. They won't be open. Then you leave a message, Mom said. And you call first thing Monday morning to make sure they got it, and you stay on the phone until you're absolutely certain they've corrected their records. What if they ask why I gave them wrong information before? Patricia asked. You tell them the truth, I said harshly. You tell them you made a mistake and you're correcting it. Jake was looking at his phone again. Patricia, we also need to talk about damage control for that email you sent. People are asking questions. What kind of questions? Mom asked. Jake grimaced. The kind where people are worried about Patricia's judgment. Some people are asking if she's okay mentally. Patricia looked mortified. What are they saying exactly? I'm not going to read you every response, Jake said. But Patricia, you need to understand that when you send an email like that to dozens of people, you don't just affect Sarah and your mom. You affect how people see you too. I sat back down across from Patricia, feeling completely drained. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep discovering new ways you've sabotaged my relationship with Mom or put her at risk. I need to know right now if there's anything else. Patricia was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. Patricia, Mom said sharply. Anything else? Patricia looked up, and there was something different in her expression. Something that made my stomach drop. There's the issue with Dad's ring, she said quietly. The silence that followed Patricia's words felt like a physical weight pressing down on all of us. I watched Mom's face go completely pale, and I felt that familiar knot of dread forming in my stomach. What about Dad's ring? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Patricia's voice was barely above a whisper. When Dad died, you remember how we couldn't find his wedding ring at the hospital? Of course I remember, I said. We looked everywhere. The nurses said sometimes rings get lost during procedures. They didn't lose it, Patricia said, still not looking up. I took it. Mom made a sound like all the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Jake leaned forward, his expression incredulous. You took it? Mom repeated. Patricia finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. I was there when he died, and you and Sarah were in the parking lot getting coffee. The nurse had taken off all his jewelry and put it in a little bag. I saw the ring, and I took it. I told myself I deserved to have it because I was the one who stayed with him at the end. I felt like I was going to be sick. Patricia, we spent hours looking for that ring. We filed reports with the hospital. We called their lost and found for weeks. I know, Patricia sobbed. And every time you called, I felt worse, but I didn't know how to give it back without admitting what I'd done. Mom was staring at Patricia with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but something deeper and more wounded. Patricia, that ring wasn't just yours to take, Mom said, her voice shaking. That was a decision for all of us to make together. I know that now, Patricia said, but in that moment, I felt like I was always getting left out of everything important. You and Sarah seemed so close, and I was always on the outside. Jake shook his head. But Patricia, taking the ring didn't fix that feeling. It just created more problems. I stood up and walked to the window, trying to process this new revelation. Where is it now? In my jewelry box at home, Patricia admitted. I've looked at it every day for 3 years and felt terrible about it. I turned back to face her. 3 years? You've let us believe it was lost for 3 years. I wanted to give it back so many times, Patricia said. Especially around the anniversary of his death, when I knew you and Mom were thinking about him. But I was so ashamed. Mom was quiet for a long moment, just looking at Patricia. When she finally spoke, her voice was different somehow. Sadder, but also more determined. Patricia, I need you to understand something. Your father loved both of you equally. There was never any competition for his love, just like there's no competition for mine. But you and Sarah are so alike, Patricia said. You think the same way, you like the same things. That doesn't mean I love her more, Mom said firmly. It means we express our similarities in obvious ways. But Patricia, you have so many of your father's qualities. His stubbornness, his determination, even his tendency to act first and think later. I saw something shift in Patricia's expression at that. The difference is, Mom continued, your father learned to channel those qualities in positive ways. He learned to think about how his actions affected other people. Jake nodded. Patricia, it seems like every choice you've been making lately comes from this fear that you're not loved enough or included enough. But the things you're doing to try to fix that are actually pushing people away. I know, Patricia said miserably. I can see that now, but I don't know how to stop feeling this way. I sat back down, feeling a mix of anger and sympathy that was hard to reconcile. Patricia, I need you to bring me Dad's ring tomorrow. I will, she said immediately. And I need you to understand that this isn't just about the ring, I continued. It's about the fact that you've been making decisions based on lies you tell yourself about how Mom and I feel about you. Mom reached over and took Patricia's hand. Sweetheart, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer. Do you want to repair our relationships? Or do you want to keep fighting for something that was never a competition in the first place? Patricia was quiet for a long time, and I could see her really considering the question. I want to repair them, she said finally. But I don't know if I know how to stop feeling jealous and left out. Jake leaned forward. Those feelings don't just disappear overnight. But Patricia, you can choose not to act on them in destructive ways. You can choose to talk about them instead of creating drama. What if you started small? I suggested, surprising myself with the offer. What if, instead of assuming Mom and I are plotting against you or talking about you, you just ask us directly what's going on? Patricia looked up hopefully. You'd be okay with that? I'd rather deal with a dozen direct questions than one more manufactured crisis, I said honestly. Mom squeezed Patricia's hand. And Patricia, I want you to start coming to my doctor's appointments with Sarah and me. Not because you've demanded it or created a scene, but because I want you there. Patricia started crying again, but these tears looked different. Really? Really, Mom said. But if you're going to be part of these important moments, you have to be trustworthy. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more putting your feelings ahead of my actual needs. Patricia nodded emphatically. I promise. I really promise this time. Patricia, I said carefully, I need you to understand that rebuilding trust is going to take time. You've done some serious damage, and promises alone aren't going to fix it. I know, Patricia said. I know I have to prove it with my actions. Jake looked around at all of us. I think this is the first real conversation you three have had in a long time. He was right. For the first time in years, maybe ever, we were all being completely honest about what was happening between us. I have a suggestion, Mom said. I think we should plan to have regular family meetings, not crisis meetings like this one, but regular check-ins where we can all talk about how we're feeling and what's going on in our lives. Like a family meeting schedule? Patricia asked. Exactly, Mom said. Every few weeks, we sit down together and just talk. No accusations, no drama, just honest conversation. I considered this. I think that could work, as long as we all commit to being honest instead of manipulative. Patricia nodded. I want to try. I really do. Looking at my sister in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Instead of the calculating, defensive person she'd become, I saw glimpses of the sister I'd grown up with. The one who used to build blanket forts with me and share secrets late at night. Patricia, I said, I need you to know that I've never said anything bad about you to Mom, and I've never tried to turn her against you, but I also need you to know that if you keep doing things that put Mom at risk, I will protect her first. I understand, Patricia said. And Sarah, I need you to know that I've never actually hated you. I've been jealous and hurt, but underneath all of that, I've missed having you as a real sister. I felt tears starting in my own eyes then. I've missed that too. Mom looked back and forth between us. You two used to be such good friends when you were little. I always hoped you'd find your way back to each other. Jake smiled for the first time since this whole conversation started. It seems like maybe you're starting to. As we sat there in Mom's living room, with the afternoon light fading outside, I realized that this crisis had forced us to have conversations we should have been having for years. It wasn't going to magically fix everything, but it felt like a real beginning. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Patricia, here's what needs to happen. You're going to call Dr. Martinez's office right now and leave that message. Tomorrow you're bringing me Dad's ring, and you're going to send a follow-up email to everyone you contacted, telling them you made an error and that you've resolved it with the family. Patricia nodded at each point. And all of us, I continued, looking around the room, are going to start being honest about our feelings before they turn into actions that hurt each other. Agreed, Mom said firmly. Agreed, Patricia said. Jake grinned. Well, I'm just glad I finally get to be part of a functional family conversation instead of a crisis intervention. For the first time in hours, we all laughed. It felt good and fragile and hopeful all at once. As Patricia picked up her phone to call the doctor's office, I realized that maybe the most important thing I'd learned from all of this wasn't about my sister's behavior, but about the importance of addressing problems before they become crises. We'd let years of small hurts and misunderstandings build up into something that had almost destroyed our family. But we'd also proven that it was possible to have hard conversations and come out stronger on the other side. As I watched Patricia leave her message for Dr. Martinez, taking responsibility for her mistake, I felt something I hadn't felt about my sister in years. Hope